Okay, welcome everybody. So happy that you're all part of this session with us today, building a sustainable vision and purpose. We're going to be having a panel discussion, and my name is Abhirambika Ravivarman. I'm your host for today's session. I'm a life leadership coach and also the co-leader of Life Vision and Enhancement, a community of practice with ICF Global. I would like to introduce our speakers for today. I will start with Dinni. Hi, Dinni. So nice to have you with us today.
Hi,
Okay, so I
Veronica.
will.
Nice to see you too.
Hi. Yes, thank you so much. Such a pleasure to have you with us. And for all the audience, Dinni is from Wipro Foundation. He has been working in sustainability and community programs for over a decade. He's been deeply associated with Wipro's programs on climate change, urban ecology, environment education, and also recently with all the COVID, that all of us went through, he's been working on that as well. And he has a master's in chemical engineering and from IIT Kharagpur. So we have a very different personality. One side he's an engineer, chemical engineer, but also, working in the development sector. So happy, Dinni, for joining us again. So our next speaker for today is Sujana. Thank you, Sujana, for joining us. So
Pleasure.
Sujana is the executive director of Under the Mango Tree Society. Sujana has worked in development sector for over 25 years. So all of you, she has immense experience like Dinni, and she has been in this sector for 25 years. So you can, whatever questions revolve in your head related to development sector, you can route it to her. So she's worked in areas of labor research, participatory governance, and livelihood. So again, once again, thank you so much, Sujana, for joining. And here is our moderator, the person who is going to, work between both of them. So Mugdha, thank you so much again uh, for being here. We all know you. You are an MCC with ICF. So, and I've seen you speak in many sessions, and you're a fantastic speaker yourself. And today you're going to moderate these lovely speakers that we have. And a little introduction about Mukta. She is a TISS HR professional, founder of National Head of Kasturi Initiative or TCS RD. She again comes with a rich 25 years of experience with companies like Godrej and Tata, and she's worked a lot, in the CSR space. So another apt, very very apt panel moderator, I would say. So welcome all of you.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
so I'm moving off stage. The stage is all yours. So all the best, and I will be there watching the Q&A. Anytime you need me, I'm going to be there for you.
Thank you very much, Ambika. So, audience, I'm actually a representative of all the learners in this session, and I will be moderating first myself, but not taking the speaker's role, because it's time when we actually listen how coaching has actually impacted sustainability of vision and purpose in development sector for NGO to do their work more effectively. And rather than anybody else talking about it, the most appropriate person we have today is Sujana with us. So while her organization name is Under the Mango Tree, Sujana, you can actually guide the entire forest in this session today. Different species are waiting to know how they can flourish with coaching as an enabler while they want to achieve their wider vision and actually serve their purpose, which can serve many ripple effects. So, Sujana, over to you and your insights.
Thank you so much, Mugdha, and welcome to everyone who's part of this session. So we kind of thought this is going to be a bit of a freewheeling conversation. Just to introduce myself, though I know Apirambika did. So Under the Mango Tree Society is a very young organization in some sense, because we are around 12 years old, and we are an organization which started literally, you hear of startups in the technology sector. So we are a startup in the development sector. So we started out with a concept note, we piloted it, and today we work in 3 states, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Madhya Pradesh, with small farmers. So like with most startups, for us, coaching was never, or even we don't have much money to invest in resources in organizations like ours, which is the story with most mid-level organizations in the development sector. So we came to coaching purely by chance. We'd gone to meet another NGO, Jai Vakil Foundation, and in the course of the conversation, they mentioned that, they had been through coaching and it was a very productive experience for them. And maybe we should also try it. And that's when we got connected to the ICF Mumbai chapter. And we had a very fruitful visit when CN and a bunch of others visited our office. And they actually told us they demystified coaching. So to us, coaching was something that you read about in newspapers, which corporate leadership undertook. It's not something that we thought that NGOs would be applicable, but they very nicely told us as to what coaching could do for us and for the organization as a whole. So of course we were all quite smitten by it, and also the reason was, at that stage, this was around 4 years ago, this was a growing organization. So as a growing organization, you have multiple challenges. In the social sector, it tends to be a little bit more pronounced, if I can call it, because we are small teams, resource strapped. So you have 1 or 2 people managing multiple functions. So somebody is doing donor engagement, fundraising, as well as writing reports. You have operations in the field where we are working with the community also. So that's a completely different set of challenges. And most of us, we have a very diverse set of people working with us, many of whom are first generation learners, haven't gone to business school or haven't gone to even grad school for that matter. So when they are pitched into leadership positions, we have a whole bunch of issues that are happening. So there's a whole bunch of things that I think in some ways are very specific to the development sector, which organizations like ours grapple with. At the same time, there is the understanding that today's civil society and the development sector is a very important component of nation building. So you have the government, you have media, but as COVID would have shown us, even in the districts that we worked in, because we had the reach with the community, district administrations reached out to us, and we don't do health. We actually work with small farmers and beekeeping and agriculture, primarily to help us reach COVID messages to the community, also fundraise, which was a bit of a surprise for us, because we were able to quickly fundraise and get stuff like, oximeters to ASHA workers. So just to highlight that the civil society as a whole is a very important component in a very in the nation building process, and it's not something that that many of us probably pay as much attention to. Anyway, to come back. So in all of this, we realized that coaching was probably something that would help us, both as individuals and as teams. So the entire leadership team of our organization, as well as key personnel, like, for example, those managing HR and finance, all of us enrolled for, individual coaching with a set of coaches from ICF Mumbai chapter. So this was a whole new experience for us, completely, it opened our eyes to coaching, and what it meant. For me personally, my personal story, my coach was Narayanan, Naru to many of you, whom we unfortunately lost a couple of years ago. And today I was thinking this morning, if he knew I'd be talking about coaching, he'd probably be very happy about it, because we had a bunch of very passionate individuals who coach us, and many of them did it pro bono, because they realized that, this was something new for us and we really didn't have the resources. My personal coaching story is that at that time I was grappling with my leadership style. So the general, what do you call it? If you want to call it, the wisdom was, I was being told that, you need to be more aggressive. You need to get your team you need to talk more aggressively to them, get onto the phone with them and push them. Whereas I was not very comfortable with that kind of leadership. My style is more of an empathetic style of leadership. If somebody is not performing, there are various reasons to it. So, it's probably, you need to go into it. So my coaching conversations helped me step back and actually figure out for myself what is the kind of leadership style that would work for me as an organization leader. My colleagues, for example, had a bunch of other issues. There was somebody who was very good in the field, but who would completely close up when he was in front of a community of people, when he had to speak. There was another person who found it very difficult to go to donors and fundraise. There was mental blocks that she was having. A fourth person was grappling with work-life balance. A fifth person was, very good at work, but always struggling with deadlines. So, these were a bunch of issues that we actually brought to the table. And coaching proved to be a very enriching journey for all of us, both personally and as an organization, because that was also the time that we had applied for an award, a very prestigious award in the development sector. It's the HCL Foundation grant, in which organizations across the country apply for. And this is a story that I like telling again and again, so I'm going to repeat it here at this forum. So we were the underdogs in this whole process. And somehow, because we like to think that a lot of it was because of coaching, because all of us were able to deal with these various cobwebs in our head and move forward as a team. And actually, we won the award. And I actually told Naru and CN and a lot of the others that, I think coaching played a very important role in us as an organization achieving this goal. So I think, Mugdha, I'm going to stop here and hand it back to you.
Thanks, Sujana. You raised lots of curiosities in the minds of the entire audience, and we are going to come back to you. And I'm going to come back to you with a question which I'm going to leave you with right now before going to Dinni. Is development sector is actually facing VUCA times like nobody else. You are VUCA champions yourself, and everything is developing within development sector. So when you're told to define your vision and purpose with some mid-term, long-term, short-term goals and targets, how do you feel so much sorted, and how does coaching help in getting those cobwebs cleared in terms of getting this deliverable, which is expected out of you by most of the outsiders who are otherwise going for an organized sector realities? With your realities, how do you remain to be such a bunch of wisest people among the craziest environment? And how does coaching play a role? So I'll come back to you for the answer for that. Meanwhile, Dinni ji, on the part of supporting ecosystem, you have been on both the sides, both in terms of seeing how development sector works, also seeing how other ecosystem players, including CSR, including corporates, can play a role in that. So what you would like to open your sharing with in terms of building sustainable vision and purpose with coaching as a core tool?
Thanks, Mugdha, for this opportunity, and welcome to everyone session. So just to give a brief background, so we are a small group of team, like in any CSR organization. So we are a 20-member team working with around 300 odd organizations across various spectrum of social issues, whether it is education, public health, ecology, disaster rehabilitation, which included COVID work also. I think one of the key things is that how is the team formed? Many of us have come from the corporate sector, including myself. I spent about 15 odd years working in the core IT project management work. Then I moved out of interest to the social sector. However, the new crop of people who are joining are from the social sector. They have some background in the development social sector, but you could say many of the oldies like myself are from the traditional corporate sector. I think fundamentally there is a mind shift change required when somebody comes to the social sector, right? A lot of us come with this whole, I would say, a couple of very strong beliefs and perspectives. One is very results driven, right? So we want to look at something that will, obviously the corporate sector looks at quarterly results, half-year results, annual results. We want to look at something that is outcome driven, very focused on that. The second is that there is some kind of approach of saying that we know it all. Right? So we pretty much think that we pretty much have things in control. In the corporate sector, you typically have your strategic plan, you have your long-term goals, you know your team, you know challenges, you know around going around, working around those things. So I think other thing is that the kind of surety that you have. So corporate sector typically is not built primed to this VUCA environment, right? So we kind of have certain kind of assumptions, certain kind of beliefs the thing will work in all areas, right? I think for many of us who joined the sector, I think that was a major shift in perspective building, perspective changing, right? And I think that has also informed our work, right? In terms of how do we look at set of principles that we will apply when we work in social sector. Right? One is we're not looking for short-term objectives. Of course, there are short-term outcomes, but we're investing for the long term. When you're getting into a sector, we're investing it for years or even decades, right? Because the change is not going to happen overnight. Some of the issues that you're talking about, like education or public health, they're long-term systemic issues. So the change is not going to happen overnight. So you need to embed it, be invested in that whole journey for the long term. The second is systemic interventions. More often than not, and also it's also led by the whole approach to the whole CSR business, saying that you get into a project, you do some investment, you put some capex, you do some project, and then you come off and hope that it will sustain. Unfortunately, things don't work that way in the social sector, right? You need to be invested and be really engaged on the ground with communities for the long term. Especially, take an example of education, right? School education. It's a huge capacity gap, a quality gap in the country right now, and that's not much to do with say resources or technology or infrastructure. It's more about how do you create the ecosystem of teachers and the environment in the school that creates a learning environment, right? And those things obviously cannot happen overnight with a typical project mode, right? So one of the key things that we are doing when we look at CSR or community work is that look at a systemic approach to problem solving in social sector. That's one of the key things that we're looking at. The second thing is a deliberative approach, right? Like what I said, in the corporate sector, you typically are kind of, you know where you're going. If you go off track, somebody is going to guide you, consult you, mentor you to come on track. In this sector, it's very different, right? I mean, we are not the experts in this space at all. So our team or our group or any company for that matter who are trying to enable or support the work in social sector, we are not experts. The experts are people like Sujana, people like all the other community volunteers working on the ground. So I think one of the key things is to have a deliberative approach, listen very actively, understand the perspectives, have a lot of empathy and a lot of listening skills. And while you have a overarching goal or an overarching plan in mind, there's a lot of space given to the partner, given to the community organization to experiment and change course as we go along. I think these are the few things that I think we have tried to embed in our organization learning and organization capacity building. And for example, many of us, as I was saying, you can typically use a consulting or a mentoring approach in corporate sector, but that really is not the right way to look in a social sector. I think coaching works great. And in fact, for our own team members, we offered a set of coaching modules, right? So anybody could nominate for a coaching program. And I think the feedback from many of them was quite positive because each of them had a unique set of, I would say, contextual challenges, working with different set of partners, whether it is socioeconomic backgrounds, whether it is from a domain background, education, public health challenges. So I think the way we're able to kind of give inputs and prompt them with leading questions so that they can have very deep and meaningful conversations with our partners. So I think from that perspective, I thought coaching can be a very useful, I would say, framework or a tool for us to inform having more deeper conversations with our partners in this space. So that's one. And secondly, also what I see is that when we speak to partners, there are a lot of challenges, right? So one is right from very operational things like organizational capacity building, tools or skills they need in terms of technology or communication, but also in terms of ensuring that they're able to kind of run the course for a long period of time. Like I was talking to some of my colleagues, and this is quite well known that there are a lot of NGOs in India, right? But I think in terms of sustenance, in terms of running the course and keeping it steady over a long period of time, there are very few who really stay the course and work committed on the ground. And I think that's reflective of the fact that there is not enough, I would say, coaching available for a lot of the organizations, right? It's a very, very difficult landscape out there, right? So there are a lot of socioeconomic challenges, there are a lot of political issues, a lot of community issues on the ground. And I think while a lot of the initiatives do start with a lot of passion from the founders and from the others, but I think that kind of what I would say mindset and belief system to cascade to the partner organization is also something that's not very easy. So I think coaching can definitely be applied to many contexts, and I think development sector is a very good landscape to kind of to add value to the whole sector as well. Back to you, Mugdha.
So, Dinni, one quick question which comes to our mind, and thanks to Mantha Bala for asking it, is about the language. There is a language difference between the coach's language and development sector language. It is not only restricted to the literal language changes, including the regional language spoken by community leaders on ground, and specific one or two language chosen by coaches. So it starts from the literal language changes, and as you said, different approaches ends up getting into different languages when it is brought down to a common conversation. So how do you cross over the language barrier to ensure that beneficiaries actually get the real benefit of what coaching is having as its potential? So any words on that?
Yeah, I think that's a valid point, because obviously we have projects and partners in different parts of the country. Language barriers can be there. There could be cultural barriers. There could be other barriers, right? Most the typical approach is that you may not know the language, you may not know the cultural context, but you I think one of the key things is to visit, spend time on the field, right? More often than not, organizations like ourselves, the people who are doing grants or donors, I think they are typically from the corporate background, and I think there is some reluctance to venture out in the field and be uncomfortable with the situation and try to understand the nuances of what's happening on the ground. I think we encourage a lot of our team members to spend at least 1/3 of their time on the field, on the ground, visiting communities, speaking to partners, having first-hand information of what's happening on the ground. I do not think language is a major barrier, because when we visit the community, I think obviously there are people from the partner organization, but I think we also get a sense of what they're trying to say. There is we use a mix of languages and other ways to communicate. And I think, in my personal opinion, language is not so much a barrier than being the person understanding the feelings and the nuances that the person conveys to you. So I never felt a language barrier, though sometimes it does help if you know the local language, if you want to ask a question or if you want to get some feedback. But otherwise, language is not the issue. I think it's more about the empathy and being there and understanding, knowing firsthand the challenges and the nuances of the issues there on the ground.
Thanks, Dinni. Sujana, your views on that, how language of heart can cross over the language barrier of tongue?
Yeah, so actually I'm going to look at this question two ways. One is interpreted very literally in terms of the language, spoken language. So we had around 18 people undergo coaching in our organization from various locations. So there were coaches who did the coaching entirely in Hindi, some who actually did the coaching in Marathi for our staff who were in other locations. So there was really no issue, because I think today the ICF coaching community is so large that you will find speakers of all languages in the community, number one. Number two, yesterday I was listening to the conversation with Charles and Shiv were having, where they said coaching is a two-way process. So I don't think you don't really need to worry about will the coach understand the language in the development sector. It was a lot of learning both ways. So I think that was, and the beauty of the whole exercise was that most of our coaches from round one, so after the leadership team went through coaching, we also had our second line of people in the organization go through coaching. So most of the coaches from the first round actually signed up for coaching the second cohort also, because I think the learning in both ways was so rich and varied, because here was a different set of issues, different set of perspectives, different way you're seeing things. So this whole, and a lot of us have become great friends with our coaches also. So I think it's a great two-way conversation that can happen, and the coaching community need not worry whether they will understand the language which is spoken in the development sector. No, at some level the challenges are the same, whether you're in the corporate sector. Maybe here it's a bit more intense, a little different, but I think it's a great opportunity for the coaching community also to kind of spread itself out. In fact, yesterday they were talking about what are the new areas that we as coaches can reach out to. We were talking about people retired from the banking sector, etc. But I was like, here's the development sector. There are so many of us here who are happy to take on coaching. So yes, definitely, please. And somebody had asked the question, and in fact, Mugdha, you had also asked, how can a coach develop the vision of an organization? I think there was one question on the chat
Yes,
box.
Avinash ji asked that, and I picked it up from there.
Yes, exactly. So the thing with coaching in terms of developing a vision for an organization is that most of the people, if you're working with the, for example, if you're doing the vision of an organization, you're sitting around a table of people who've been through it all, who understand what the community wants, who understand where the organization needs to go. But what we don't have is the luxury of probably sitting back and reflecting on all of this and creating a path forward. And this is where we require an external guide, if you want to call it, or an external, in the development sector, one of the things that we say is external resource person. Whenever we have trainings, we have external resource persons. So that is a good way for the coach to kind of, many times, like with others, we're so used to hearing the same things that, when a third person listens to it, they probably kind of are able to draw a different set of meanings from what is being said. So I would say that if a coach wants to help an organization develop a vision, they just need to get the key people who've been with the organization for a while, get them to talk, spend a day and a half, preferably in the field with them. And then at the end of it, you'll have a vision for the organization. Because what we don't have, we get so caught up in the day-to-day things of doing things, that we don't get the time to reflect, and which was what happened with me and with many of my colleagues. It's literally firefighting on a daily basis. So maybe what coaching can do is create that space for us. And as an organization, what we have done is set apart resources for coaching in our training, in our very minuscule training budgets, like I mentioned, because we understand that this is a resource that we are developing not just for our organizations, but for the civil society sector as a whole. So I do think the time has come for coaching to play a larger role in the development sector.
So Sujana, it is one thing to develop the vision. Now there is a question from Parul about how to sustain it. While the ground reality in development sector is that project longevity and strength depends on external factors like government priorities, funders, support. How do you sustain a vision and purpose which is defined but dependent on external resources? So how coaching helps in that?
Okay, so a good example here is our own organization under the Mango Tree Society. So we started out with in the initial years, we were like around 10 to 12 lakhs, 25 lakhs was, if you could call it, the turnover of the organization. And today we've grown a lot since then. We are a mid-level organization. The mid-level in the development sector is also not very large. It's probably 3.5, 4 crores, what many of you earn in a year. We spend that money training 3,000, 4,000 farmers across 3 states in 1 year, as well as pay our salaries and all of that. So the point here is that the environment is difficult. But what we in the development sector know is how to sustain. If you're a good team with the vision, with key resource people, in the organization, who are able to deliver, the organization will find its own way to fundraise. So what a us, we are not dependent on just government funds. We have a whole basket of funders now. So sustainability, so what coaching does is need to enable that sustainability by helping people grow in the organization. So it's like the organization knows that it needs to do something, but you need to kind of help us achieve our potential. You need to help us work efficiently, whether in teams or whatever. But otherwise, you'll find a way to. So one thing that we are all very good at is we are very resilient. But what we do require is, all those building blocks which make us resilient, which may be required both for the team as well as for the individual. So this is the kind of investment that needs to be made in people and in organizations, and sustainability, in my opinion, will follow.
Thanks, Sujana, for that. So just moving on to very linked question. For sustainability, it requires sustainability of team also. So Siddharth has asked a very striking question, that earlier development sector used to see highly dedicated individuals who are ready to dedicate their life irrespective of their professional growth or gains. Now we are moving towards more professional breed of people who are educating themselves in development sector, may or may not be so much inclined towards forming or joining an NGO. So my question this is first to Dinni. For this professional breed of new development sector professionals, to attract, sustain, and develop them, how do you see coaching playing a role, so that NGOs can not only attract professional talent but also meet their growth aspirations through growth of their own organization?
Thanks, Mugdha. This is a great question, Siddharth. I think this issue of capacity gap, capacity development, we recognize that with our existing partners as well as with our own team members, right? For example, initially we were one of the functions of the corporate Wipro Limited. Then we set up a separate foundation, which is, you could say, from a operational perspective and the way you are structured, it's more like an NGO, right? We are not a corporate setup right now. And I think when you're looking at talent, when you're looking at people to join, you have a certain perspective. People come with certain assumptions, right? While there's a lot of interest, for example, a lot of people reach out to us saying that we want to join the development sector. What are the kind of role opportunities? Is there anything available? But I think there's a certain set of people only who can sustain for the long term, right? Which is all about perspective, long-term thing, trying to understand the whole this whole VUCA landscape, right? Working with partners in a very complex landscape. That I think needs certain skills, and I think that can only be built over a period of time through coaching and other such interventions, right? The other challenge that I also see in the NGO world is that, which I was mentioning, while I think there's a huge amount of resilience and capacity in NGOs to kind of stay the course, they also need this whole, I think, organizational scaffolding, capacity building work. While Sujana was kind of saying that amount of investment that you make in capacity building is very small, it's also reflective of what funders are doing, because many funders want to look at project-based funding or outcome-based funding, and the amount of resources they typically would support, say for such work, coaching or organization development, maybe less than 5%, even much less than that, right? And that's not sufficient. Right? I think there is a need for us to reframe the intervention, and how do you help sustain the vision in the social sector by reframing the kind of support you do, right? One is project kind of funding, right? You do some work on the ground, you set up an infrastructure, just give examples, you set up a new primary healthcare center, you support some resources. That all is capex and maybe expenditure dependent. But there's also a requirement to support the organization's human resource development capacity. That is not a very clear frame with most a CSR and corporate organization, right? Um, in some organizations, they may have some kind of a framework. Say, for example, let's take an example of endowment funding. Not many organizations do endowment funding. Endowment typically gives the freedom to organizations to have this pot of money. They don't need to worry about sustaining that. Worry about the funding for a period of time. So if you have a decent amount of endowment, then you can use the returns from that for capacity building, for certain other core organizational development skills. I think that's a challenge. I have to admit that because of the way the whole CSR discourse is framed up, the laws and other things, that doesn't give too much space for this kind of support to organizations, right? And when we look at some of the larger organizations, we try to provide some kind of a support in that category. The second is to get new talent in the sector. I think what we have attempted, at least in the education space, we have a fellowship program, right? So, for example, education is such a diverse background. You have so many districts, so many states in remote parts of the country. One of the ways that we have tried to build capacity or people to that sector is to offer something called the education fellowship program, right? At this point of time, in the last 3 years, we have kind of scaled up to more than 200 fellows. And these fellows work in remote parts of the country, districts. They're on the ground, 2-member team, 3-member team, working at a taluka level, block level, or district level. That I think has helped us to get a lot of people on board. Sorry, Mugdha.
No, just want to insert a sub question here, that for these young professionals, such as these fellows, how does coaching help in developing them and sustaining them with the NGO sector? Any added thoughts in that line?
So Mugdha, see, for these fellows who have joined, right, young fellows who have joined, as of now, the only structured program that we have is there are two things. One is we have a learning management platform which provides a lot of these skills in terms of navigating the whole space in their sector, a lot of context on education, school education, curriculum development, and that kind of more of domain skills. The other thing that we've done is create something called the communities of practice, because essentially you are working all alone in a remote part of the country with very few connects, say to mentors or peers, right? And there's a challenge. I mean, for us to actually have a one-to-one coaching, a coach, which each of these organizations is not very easy. So what we have done so far, and I think which we'll kind of build on going forward, is we created something called a communities of practice, where there are a set of mentor organizations, anchor organizations working in this space who have been working in education or in school reforms for many decades. And they're available as a sounding board. And obviously, they are not just, they're working across different parts, like different parts of the country, like MP, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh. So that way, you have somebody to reach out to in case you are, you need some help, support, right? To get direction, to get clarity on. So it's currently, you could say, largely online, but we also do something called the annual forum. We have an annual partners forum where we get all the fellows and also some of the mentor organizations to come together and kind of also interact with each other. So right now, we may not call it as a coaching, but some of the coaching principles are kind of embedded in many of the interventions that we're doing, right? So that's how we are currently working on this.
Thanks, Dinni. Sujana, over to you. As you move towards being more and more attractive employer NGO for professional in development sector to come and join you, as Raghunandan has said, that it is also the self-awareness building facilitated by coaching which can contribute to retain the young talent towards the professional side. So what's your actual experience on that on ground?
Yeah, I want to add to what, and I'm so glad that his organization is supporting initiatives like this, because today most donors tell us that the money is to be spent on projects. It's difficult for us to even any amount. In fact, we've had some donors, we will not be contributing to the corpus because they qualify for CSR and the days of target are long over. So that's the challenge that we NGOs face. We need to kind of build in capacity for our staff. Having said that, I think you realize that can help the entire organization as individuals. So you decide what little money you prioritize. Coaching has been a that way. So it the fact that we invest in coaching has an indicator of the fact organization value. No, and many questions that were dealt with coaching were not really personal. I mean, they were not really professional. But for example, also work-life balance issues. I think kind of creates value for the person in the organization. So that coaching could be a important, if you for an individual to feel valued in the organization. So for example, I do know that who underwent coaching, future people who are coming to the organization, they'll say organization which will in you. So do this organization be X, Y, Z organization.
So now a little bit of general questions coming back to the theme of this session. When we talk about vision and purpose, at team level and at individuals level, people come with their own aspirations, their own vision, or their own purpose of life, and how coaching can help integrate them into one vision and purpose, right from the leadership development till the entire organizational identity and path ahead. So anything on the integrative contribution of coaching which you have experienced? I leave it to both of you. Anybody can start answering it. We'll come to the other one after that. So
I'll let Dinni take first.
Sure. I was hoping that Sujana will give insights on this because she has seen through all these challenges, and she has worked on coaching in an organization. I think, like as I was saying, we can only provide that space for organizations to have that coaching space to be available in the organization, right? As a donor organization, as a CSR organization, what we can do is recognize that there is a need in the organization. For example, if there is a leadership change, there's a team change happening in the organization, or they're not able to expand to certain domains of work. For example, if they're working in a state and we want to ask them to move to another state, then they really would need a lot of organization scaffolding capacity to be developed. And I think it's more of conversations that we have with partners. The partners would say that, yes, that is something we can do. It's possible to do. However, we would need support in terms of building a team afresh, or trying to anchor the initiative there with appropriate support from your organization. Typically, when that happens, and we have seen that happening in a couple of instances where I think one organization, for example, in Pune, we asked them to mentor 4 or 5 smaller organizations who are just building out. And if you don't support them, they're not going to stay the course. So the way it happened was, it was, you could say, a 3-way program that we had. You could so there was this large anchor organizations from the NGO world. Then we had the smaller organizations who were working in specific parts of the city on water issues. Then we had a anchor, I would say, arrangement with the municipal corporation. Right? So essentially, when this happens, right, there's a kind of ecosystem built around this program. So the program is not so much driven by one organization or one NGO, right? But it is you're creating an ecosystem of partners who are working on the ground in that city. I'm just giving an example of a city here. But so that's what we're trying to do. How do you create some kind of a platform or a forum or a community which is working on a specific district or a city or a domain? And I think in our experience that helps to sustain, because when we are also looking at projects, we're looking not just at a project specific approach, we're looking at more of a systemic intervention in that domain or in that area. I think that has helped because even the smaller organizations tend to reach for support to the larger mentor organization or NGO. And the government also tries to get a sense of the overall integrative approach that we are trying to do. And we don't claim that one organization is supporting the whole thing. While we want to be enabling that be enabler for the platform. And once the platform is created, we hope the other NGOs partners will come on board.
Sure. Thanks for that. So, as I understood from your sharing, is coaching does not only help at the level of individual and team, but it also helps in building an ecosystem approach to the entire way of working and adds to the collaborative mindset to start with, and those kind of activities follow thereon. So,
Yes, absolutely.
thank you very much for that sharing. Sujana, before coming to you, I would like to answer one of the questions asked is about why coaches should look at development sector, which is generally tagged as if it is only pro bono coaching. If you want to come to pro bono coaching, only then you can go to development sector as if. So want to kill that glass ceiling just for the audience is that it is not so. It is one of the fastest growing sector in commercial coaching as well. While you can start pro bono for you to develop yourself as a coach in development sector, because there is lots of exchange. And when you even when you do a pro bono, it's not pro bono, it's pro uno. There is lots of learning on both the sides, and what we learn from our development sector client is very directly enriching ourselves as coaches, and which we can actually use in our commercial practice as well. So even pro bono coaching in development sector is quite an investment in self development for coaches themselves. While that's said, the sector is developing very fast, and many NGOs are now having their own fund and even fundraising capacity to get the commercial coaching on board and as a way of their organization development. So before saying more about that, I would like Sujana to share light on how coaching is becoming a way of life and not just a pro bono experiment on both the sides. So how it is growing and how it is sustained.
I hope my audio is better. I did switch connections. Yeah. So 25 people in our organization who underwent coaching, only 3 pro bono. Paid for everything.
Yeah, there is some breakage even now, so you may want to go a little slow, and we'll manage to hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we are resources in the organization for coaching, capacity building. I would say it's a good thing that funders like Dinni are also looking at, and I think they should. And as somebody, there are many people in the sector here who also SR teams. Probably something that offered to NGOs of the assistance, grant assistance from corporates to NGOs. So these are ways that which I think together we can make coaching blossom in the development sector.
Yeah, I got that. I've got to add to that, just for compensating for the audio glitch, is Sujana's organization under the Mango Tree has been keeping a specific budget aside for this purpose, having experienced the coaching benefits, and now funders are also realizing importance of funding development sector with such services as an ongoing thing of leadership development for the organizations.
Right.
So thank you for sharing that. Yes, Dinni.
Now, I think this question about whether the development sector is all about pro bono coaching. I think just to kind of also touch to the other side of the social sector, while social sector and development sector is the theme of this session, if you look at the larger corporate world, right, there's a lot of work happening in terms of how do you engage with your suppliers, right? How do you engage with your communities? See, because CSR is typically what you do outside the fence, which is outside your business work. But even in the core business also, there's a lot of work that's happening in terms of human rights, labor practices, also trying to look at environmental issues, right, in your procurement.
So I think, and I see a significant need even in the core operations of organizations like the procurement team, supply chain team, say operations team. It's not happening at this right now, but when I speak to my functions and all, I see a significant, I would say, a team coaching or a organizational kind of coaching for specific functions. They may be working in core functions of the organization, like as I said, procurement or operations, but the work they do has a lot of impact on communities, right? And I think it's very important that even the core functions of organizations need to have a coaching mindset, because only then they'll be able to empathize and deal with the complexities of their work. Otherwise, they're just going to do transactional work, which is typically what they do. So I think there's a lot of scope, and we recognize that. And it's not easy to have the conversations with corporates and kind of make them understand that this is not something that is purely for development, but also for your core business organization as well.
Sure. And as some of the questions and suggestions were pouring in, starting early in the development sector, right at the level of academia, having those case studies, having those interactions with fellows, as Dinni was suggesting, is now picking up slowly and steadily. While we do that, there is also a question, and a very valid one, is NGO sector's leaders themselves are high on empathy level for all their stakeholders, themselves are quite a coach themselves. So many a times NGO sector face a question that aren't they themselves the coach? Why do an organization requires external coaching services when they themselves have such coaching competencies? So now it has both a yes and a no as an answer. Both has a merits and limitations. So would like Sujana to share some light on NGO leaders' own capacity to coach their own team, and how an external coach professional adds value to that.
So I don't professionally qualified to be coaches. We are empathetic, but what I understood is that coach is completely different altogether. So we may be leaders, but I don't think we are professionally qualified to give. So that this sector specialized to intervene. So so that's my short answer.
So thanks for being so clear and so specific on that. So it says the entire long answer is answered in that one sentence. Dinni, over to you. As we reach last few minutes of this session, anything you would like to suggest around the topic to coaches as well as the NGO sector as well as CSR professionals? Any final set of words from your end?
I think the centrality of the coaching mindset is going to be critical for development sector. All of us know the challenges in the sector. It's extremely volatile, extremely changing day by day. And in my previous roles, I've done counseling, I've done mentoring and other things for various roles. But the coaching is a different skill. And I think I see a lot of relevance of that in the development sector. What I think is required is recognition, and I think this community forum, ICF forum, as well as other coaching forums, need to kind of re-emphasize the criticality of this skill, this gap, as a key requirement to build capacity in the development sector. That is one. Secondly, I think to provide required support for NGOs and community organizations to get that space, to get that support for coaching. That's very important. I think whether in terms of resources, in terms of connecting with people who can coach, that's very important. And secondly, to create platforms. I think this ecosystem approach, I think, is very relevant in our experience, because you can bring organizations together, you can bring government together, you can bring coaches or facilitators also into that forum to look at a more systemic and a deeper intervention, ecosystem-led intervention. So I think if you want to look at solving some of the critical issues in the country right now, whether it's education or health or ecology, I think the only way is to have a coaching-led approach, because that's when you can, and especially team-led coaching approach, where you can bring multiple stakeholders in the same platform and bring those skills to look at how do you solve complex problems.
Thank you, Dinni. Yes, Sujana.
Yeah, so I think that both sectors have a lot to learn from each other, and we go for it. And both coaching as well as the sector, I think they're like living for each other in many ways. So as yet explored. So I tell the coaches out there, don't worry too much about the that you'll speak to the developer. We'll understand each other directly well. Here in the sector.
Sure. Just like that audio glitch in your sharing, although we miss out on a word or two, it doesn't withheld the message you are trying to give. So we got you, Sujana. So there might be a language difference to start with, but the language of heart is much louder than that. And I second both the sharings, what Dinni and Sujana said, that there is so much to gain for both the sides, coaches as well as development sector, that working together is not only logical, but also essential and also critical and quite enjoyable, quite job satisfying for both the sides involved. And sharing my personal experience on that, I think it is one of the best investment of time and efforts I have done for my own development as a coach by contributing in development sector. And whenever we think of development sector, we need to remember the word development. Contributing to development sector helps development of coaches themselves, development of community at large, and other sectors as well. So here is a sector where we can develop ourselves through our contributions. We can see reality, the changing times, more in its purest form, which most of the time organized sectors are creating protective walls. So it is good to be in touch with development sector as part of your client portfolio throughout your coaching life, and treat them as your mutual coaches, because what they bring on the table are such diverse changing realities, such live and happening times, that is otherwise very difficult to capture in an academically protected environment, or in government protected environment, or in a commercial corporate environment. So here is a place where we can develop together, and coaching is happening reciprocal. So over to Ambika. Thanks for giving this platform for us, and we invite all to join.
We could not have asked for more. We had all perspectives, coaches side. We had the foundation, the corporate angle, and as well as from the development space itself, like from an NGO angle. So I think we kind of covered the whole spectrum, and that and fantastic insights I think we all got. So for all coaches who are here, this is the space you definitely want to spend time on, and Mugdha is there leading us right in the forefront, and to support the development sector, like what Dinni and Sujana said. It kind of helps them also to refine and also to keep working, doing their best, right? Some way as coaches we could support, and that's why part of the coaching conclave we even had sessions, which are key sessions like these, and great speakers. So thank you so much for your time, and for sharing all your lovely insights. Thank you once again, and thanks for all the participants who gave some interesting questions too. Great. I'm so happy we did this together.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.